So I do wonder though, this is the new cost update. With the change in price of the total project cost, how does this rate impact, or I'm sorry, how does this cost impact compare to the last one that we had when the price was still at 364 million?
Sure. For the average bill, it's about $2 more per month than our $364 million estimate.
Short on local water supplies and long on regulatory requirements. Do a deep dive with us by listening to the Full Circle podcast to learn how Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and the Triumphal Water and Sanitation District are meeting 21st century water supply challenges for a portion of the Los Angeles and Ventura County regions.
Hello, and welcome to the Full Circle podcast. I am Riki Clark, your host, and I will introduce our guests in just a second. I just have to start off by saying inflation. Inflation is beating me over the head. My groceries, clothes, flights, everything just costs so much money. It does. The cost of everything has gone up. Everyone is talking about it. Everyone is feeling it. We're feeling it here at the JPA, but luckily, and in large part thanks to my guest, our Director of Finance and Administration, Don Patterson, our finance team here at the Las Virgenes Triunfo Joint Powers Authority has been hard at work to make sure that inflation is not too much affecting the things that we have going on here. It is a little bit, but we're working hard to minimize impact on our customers. So, again, Don, welcome back to the show. This is your second time on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to talking with you and updating you on the Pure Water Project and how we're going to finance and fund it.
And all things funding.
Because funding is fun.
Funding is fun, and we put the fun in funding. I have to say, if you don't remember last time, I am just not a numbers guy at all. I'm not a numbers guy. That's why I'm into public relations and talking and communicating and engaging with people. Even, when our finance professionals do get into funding sources and percentages and all of that, I just have to focus extra super duper hard because it's a lot. But luckily, our team are the best at what they do. And in a little bit, we are going to get into how that affects our ratepayers. Now, Don, I first just want to mention you are a very popular guest on this podcast. Do you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I do believe, as of today, your episode in our first season still has the most views on it.
Wow, that's exciting.
Could you imagine? Out of all the things that we talked about, the most people wanted to tune in to talk numbers.
Because they see our work every month when they get a bill.
Yeah, I know, right? Is it the work or is it your bright, bubbling personality and know-how?
Hopefully both.
I agree. All right, so let's get into it. We have a lot of very interesting things to cover. You and your team have been hard at work with regard to searching for funding for our Pure Water Project. So just as a little review, we're about 5 years into this process, really 5 years into a 10-year, we like to call demonstration phase, but that's also the time that we've given ourselves to find funding, to find a progressive design build team to carry out the design and construction of the project, and to get all of the regulatory things that we need in line before we go online. And so there have been plenty of curveballs, I'm sure, when it comes to funding, given, of course, just kind of the state of the economy, inflation, things like that we've been dealing with. But again, you and your team just delivered some hotly anticipated news at our most recent JPA board meeting late last night, didn't you?
That is correct.
All right, so can we kind of talk about a price update on the project? Originally, I think the last time we chatted, that price tag was at about $364 million. Let's get into what that price is now and what things are looking like with the current landscape.
Yes, thank you. So 2 years ago, when we provided our funding and financing update to the JPA, the cost of the project was anticipated to be $364 million.
Right.
And since that time, our current cost estimate is $466 million.
$466 million. All righty. Not surprising, right? The
No.
cost of everything is going up, is it not?
It is, and actually, I mean, specific to the construction cost, if you just look at construction costs since 2020, there's an index called the construction cost index because,
Hmm.
in finance, we like to have indexes for everything. So
What's
there's
an index, Don?
an index.
Yeah.
So basically, like you have your consumer price index,
Yeah.
your construction cost index. So it measures the change in price over time.
Okay, gotcha.
So the construction cost index since 2020 has risen 20%.
Okay.
So that's just, a baseline. So,
Right.
construction costs is going to go up at least 20% over
Sure.
that time period.
And does that include like materials and supplies too, or just and labor? Like construction is
That's
makes up of what?
primarily materials and supplies.
Okay, gotcha.
And, just like you mentioned earlier in your intro, the price of everything over the last several years has gone up, even though inflation's a lot lower now than it was over the last 2
Oh,
years.
some positivity there.
But, the way inflation works is the price doesn't go down. You have a 3% increase on top of an 8% increase. So,
Right.
you're still feeling the pinch there, like we are at the district. So just, as a base, it says, 20% of that's just by cost going up.
Sure.
But then you also look at as the design progresses, there's more certainty as to what we need to do.
Yeah.
There's more accurate cost estimates,
Yeah.
and, that contributes to it. So you just have and labor costs has gone up over the last several years. So
That's probably a big one, huh?
yeah, I mean, labor costs
Yeah.
and material costs
Yeah.
has definitely gone up, and there's a lot of activity, a lot of competition. So, as an agency, we're competing against private sector construction projects, other government construction projects for the same, resources. So there's just a lot coming at us on the project front that increases cost.
Especially as other water districts in the state and in the country and even the world are dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with as far as climate change, weather patterns becoming more and more unpredictable. So everyone, they're making the same adaptations as we are, and like you said, that demand is just going to continue to go up.
Yeah, and actually, I think what you just brought up is an interesting point that I don't think we really think about, and actually I didn't really think about before right now either, is that I talked about how construction costs are going up, but the people that could build things like the Pure Water Project, that's a very specialized
Yeah, very niche
industry
Yeah.
and very niche. And you have other pure water projects throughout the state that are competing and bidding out too. And we're just all competing for the same limited resources because building something like pure water, it's not like building a house.
Right.
There's a lot of regulatory compliance that goes into it
100%.
that increases costs too.
Yeah. And so when we're looking at the costs now, this is just an estimate, right?
Correct.
So can you kind of talk about like what escalation is, right? Because I'm looking at the summary and that's a nice little chunky line item. Can you talk about that escalation and how that might change the cost up to a certain point?
Sure. So the escalation in the summary that was provided to the JPA last night is anticipated future price increases between now and when what's called the guaranteed maximum price is presented to the board. So what's a guaranteed maximum price? That's probably the next logical question. So that's the point in time where the contractor provides a bid with cost certainty to build the project.
Okay.
And then there's some risk built into that. So the escalation within the estimate we provided the board is what we're anticipating costs may increase between now and 18 months from now when that guaranteed maximum price is presented to the JPA board.
Got you. So is there like a due date for that guaranteed maximum price, which is basically like a hard cost, like the actual real cost, right?
Right. There's not a due date per se, but there's a schedule. And that schedule is for that cost to be known in, like I said, about 18 months.
Okay. So we're 18 months away, or in the next 18 months, there's still some variability with these numbers, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to also point out that within the next 18 months, there's a lot that we're going to be doing to try to keep that cost at or below the $466 million estimate we have now.
Yeah.
So part of that is our engineers are working on with the design builder to make sure that we take into account the considerations of cost with every design decision that they make.
Right.
And we're also working with our staff and folks in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento to try to limit regulatory risk
Okay.
So regulatory risk is things that we might have to do to meet different standards, and there's different ways to meet those standards.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that we don't have to do more than we
What we
need to
have to
do
do.
to, deliver pure water to everyone.
100%. And that's actually a great segue because, as a former board member of ours likes to say often, here at the JPA, we love to make use of other people's money, right? We want to make sure that our customers are not footing the bill too much, and that is the absolute last resort, right? So can we do, because we talked about this in the episode that you were with us before, so can we kind of do a quick recap of all the funding sources and all the ways that we're paying for this project before it reaches our ratepayers' bill?
Sure. So there's actually several funding sources we're exploring, and I'll just touch on each of them briefly, and then each one has its benefits. So the largest funding source is the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, which is also known as WIFIA.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a loan, so our ratepayers will be paying that back.
Right.
But that does fund 49% of the project, which is about $229 million.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge source.
And the benefits of WIFIA is that we only pay interest on what we've drawn.
Mm-hmm.
So, like a lot of loans, you take out a loan and then you have to pay interest from day one.
Right.
So that helps defray some of the interest cost.
That's why the interest is so low. Got it.
Yeah, well, actually, WIFIA's interest rate is pretty comparable to issuing bonds.
Oh, okay.
But there's a lot of flexibility with it.
So you wouldn't consider it low?
It's more the flexibility
Okay.
of the program
Okay.
than a subsidized interest rate.
Okay.
So as the time goes on, it's easy to refinance it if interest rates go low.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opportunity to refinance it before you close construction. So if interest rates go down, we could possibly take the WIFIA loan and refinance it almost right away to a lower rate. And there's just a lot of flexibility with it that helps ratepayers over the next 35 years.
Oh, gotcha.
Because it's a 35-year loan.
Right.
And then the next biggest source is the state revolving fund.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a low interest loan.
Okay.
We
Gotcha.
pay on the interest on that loan is about 50% of the other funding sources. So right now it's just over 2% interest.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty significant.
Exactly.
Is there a lot of competition for that since it's available to many other agencies throughout the state, I'm guessing?
Yes, it is a very competitive and very challenging loan to get.
Yeah, it seems like it. If it's that good, right?
We've actually been working on it for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And we just got on what's called the fundable list by the state last month. So it took a 2-year process to get to the point where we're just, where we can do everything we need to do to close the loan.
Wow.
So it's quite a lengthy process. And the unfortunate thing about it is it's capped at $50 million.
Okay.
So we're at $50 million for that. But the interest savings of 2% is pretty significant over time.
Absolutely.
And then also from the state, we're getting about $22 million from Water Recycling Fund.
Okay.
$3 million of that's a grant. So $3 million of that will not have to be paid back.
Nice. Okay.
And the interest rate on that loan is also subsidized.
Okay.
So that's,
is it as low as the SRF?
Yes,
or
yes.
Okay.
So we have 2 low interest loans.
Very nice.
And then we have a $30 million grant from the Bureau of Reclamation.
Very significant.
Which
That's from
is,
that infrastructure bill, right? Is all of it from the infrastructure bill or only part of it?
Well, it's all funded by the infrastructure bill,
Okay.
but through different federal agencies.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So that's how the funding's allocated. And then we've also been, both Las Virgenes and TWSD have been planning for this project for years.
Yes.
So when we set our rates 5 years ago, we knew this project or some major regulatory compliance project was going to happen. So we took that into account, and we've been able to amass between the 2 agencies about $50 million to pay up front.
Okay.
So that reduces, obviously we don't have to pay interest on that money.
And what is that called?
PAYGO.
That's PAYGO.
That's PAYGO.
More
Pay
vocabulary.
as you go.
Yes, more vocabulary for our listeners and viewers. We love vocab.
Exactly. And then the rest, which is probably going to be about $84 million, we're looking at either iBank, which is a state funding program or issuing our own municipal bonds.
What's the process of issuing a bond?
You could do a whole podcast on that.
Very, very high level.
Well, I mean, the short version is we have, it involves it involves financial advisors, bankers, and I guess the short version is we develop the funding need, the funding structure, and then we put the bonds out on the market.
Okay.
And then people buy the bonds, and then we repay the bondholders through a trustee.
Interesting.
So it is a way, if we issue bonds, everyone listening to this podcast can invest in Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and the future of their water reliability directly.
In the Conejo region. Oh, I love that. You learn something new every day. I had no idea. So if the 84 million, the rest is through bonds, is that 100% of funding for all of these sources, or what percentage then is going to be left up to ratepayers?
Well, that gets us to 100% of funding for the project.
Okay.
The ratepayers are responsible for paying back all the loans.
Right, that's right.
And all the bonds.
Mhm.
So basically everything that's not a grant, the ratepayers will have to pay back over the next 35 years.
Alrighty, so let's get into the
But
actual...
I do want to highlight one other thing, though.
Yes, please.
Because we got one other significant source of funding, which is called the Local Resource Program.
Oh, that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you talk about why it's so important?
It's important because the Local Resource Program provides us basically a discount on our purchased water for the next, I believe it's 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to amount to $42.5 million during the operations of Pure Water.
Right, so it's not up front.
No, it does not help with construction at all.
Right, it's over time.
However, what it does is because of that $42.5 million over the next couple of decades, it's going to reduce the amount that we need to recover from the ratepayers because we're going to have some subsidy for our purchased water. So our costs for purchased water will be lower than they would have otherwise been. And that money could be used to pay back some of these loans.
Yeah, and that's some significant relief. And that's thanks to Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, right? MWD, that's a part of their Local Resources Program, or LRP, because you know we love acronyms in the water business. And it's essentially a program that they partner with their member agencies like Las Virgenes and Triunfo or the JPA to essentially bolster a water recycling program so that we're less reliant on them. So that really goes a long way for sustainability and reliability for ourselves in the region. All right, so we've talked about these different sources, a lot of really great work you and your team have been doing to help alleviate impact on ratepayers. So can we kind of get into these hard numbers and these estimates on what those ratepayer impacts are actually going to be as of right now?
Sure. So first off, I'd just like to say that everything we do, we try to look at the impact on the ratepayers and the impact on the monthly bills. And we try to look at it in a couple different ways. We look at it in, what's the minimum necessary to deliver whatever we're trying to deliver. And then that's fed into what's called a rate study, which comes up with the rates that customers will actually pay every year.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're looking at right now, and when comparing the cost without Pure Water and with a $466 million Pure Water project, it basically, if you look at the next 10 years, it comes out to an average rate increase of 4.2% versus 2.7% per year.
Right.
So what does that mean to my pocketbook, right? That's probably the first question.
Yeah, for those of us that are not numbers guys and we don't like speaking in percentages, we like hard costs. What does that mean for us?
So give you more numbers.
Right, I know.
So that means every year the cost of your bill will go up on average an extra $4 per month per year each year.
Per month per year each year.
Correct. So, the other way to think about that is it's, the cup of coffee somewhere.
Right.
And that's the cost of water reliability.
Exactly.
And regulatory compliance.
Right, which is always such a large part of the bill. But I also like to think about it as, if we did not have guaranteed water reliability and there was ever a chance that because investments like these weren't made, my tap runs dry. What then would be the cost of having to go and get bottled water somewhere? The cost of that bottled water, which is already sold at a premium, it's going to become more of a premium at that
Exactly.
point, right? What are the costs of having to drive to go pick it up, and the physical costs of lugging it around, because we know that water is very heavy? What's the time cost, right? So anyone that's, looking at these numbers and is hating the idea of their water bill going up, considering the cost of everything else going up, I think that it's really important that we consider the alternative. And I think that especially during the last drought, when the entire region was pretty down bad for water,
Exactly.
when we got really close to actually exhausting regional water sources and we were down to that 1 day per week watering, if that had gotten even worse, if we didn't have those reserves that we had, which were investments made at one point in time, if we didn't have that weather eventually come and deliver that water, we could have been there. So these are the moves that we're making to make sure that that never becomes a reality in our region. And you can't really put a price tag on it. But, and again, I've lived in this area before. I'm, not far away now. I look at this, and if my bill has to go up a few dollars a month over the next few years to make sure I still have access to clean water, I'm not really batting an eye.
Exactly. And, another way to look at that is really your entire bill
Yeah.
is to deliver clean, reliable, potable water to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Because the water, the water's there,
Right.
but you can't get it to your house yourself.
Right.
And you probably don't want to drink it without it being treated first.
And that's a good reminder, right? Like, the water isn't particularly expensive, but to convey that water all up and through these hills and make sure that it's clean and all of the infrastructure that goes into it and the people that ensure all of that happens 24/7,
Exactly.
it comes at a cost. And I think it's important that we remember everything that goes into our water. We don't drive up to our local creek and catch water in some basins and then distribute it through our house. There's a very intricate system and business and whole world, regulatory world that goes into this kind of convenience. And again, if those increases look like a few dollars a month for the next, 10 or more years, that's what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I do wonder, though, this is the new cost update. With the change in price of the total project cost, how does this rate impact? Or I'm sorry, how does this cost impact compare to the last one that we had when the price was still at $364 million?
Sure. For the average bill, it's about $2 more per month than our $364 million estimate.
So the project cost has gone up over $100 million. It looks like about like $100 million, right?
Yeah, right.
On average.
Roughly.
I'm not the numbers person. I'm looking at these numbers.
You're only $2 million off.
I know. I'm like in my head on, live
364,
podcasts. Like,
466.
don't get these basic calculations wrong and embarrass yourself. So the project cost has gone up about $100 million, but the ratepayer impact has gone up $2 on average.
Correct. Actually, so the ratepayer impact without pure water was an average of $428 per month. With the 364 was $684 per month, and then
Right.
with the 466, it's about $8 per month.
Right.
And there's a couple of factors that are impacting that. One is, as you mentioned, the cost increase of the project.
Mm-hmm.
But then we've also updated a lot of our assumptions. When we last did this, interest rates were at a record low. And
Yes.
we projected that they were going to go up, but they went up more than we projected.
Have they?
Yeah. So, we updated it to reflect current interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
And then also our cost for MET has gone up a lot. And then, basically we updated it to reflect the current market conditions.
Yeah.
So about how, a good percentage of that increase is related to updating our projections to the current environment.
Right.
And then, the rest of it is related to the $100 million increase.
Okay. So the last time we had you on this show, I remember asking you I remember you saying that it was a pretty favorable funding environment. This was a year ago. I would say it was like maybe a year and a half, a year and some months. Would you maintain that position now? Why or why not?
Well, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. If you look at today versus a year and a half to 2 years ago,
Yeah.
The biggest impact is on interest rates are about double what they were. So, in that sense, the funding environment today is not as favorable as was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But if you want to look at it a different way,
Okay, let's get into it.
if you look at it over the last 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
interest rates today are still slightly below average when you look at the 10-year average of interest rates.
I remember us talking about that last time, and I remember being shocked.
So, yeah,
I'm
so
still shocked.
if you look at it over a longer period of time, I mean, it's still a pretty favorable environment because the interest rates for bonds and WIFIA is about 4%.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it back, I don't want to date myself too much, but what the first couple of projects that I had to get funding for, interest rates were north of 6%.
Wow.
So, if you look at it from a historical perspective, it's still fairly favorable to fund a project of this size.
That perspective
And
is important.
And if you look at the projections, there's projections that interest rates will go down a little bit over the next year. Of course, they
Right.
said that this year too.
That's what they said.
So if interest
what they
rates go
said.
down, then that will make it even more favorable, which ties back to what I said about the WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Loan, because that loan we could lock in an interest. We could close the loan, but lock in the interest rate at a later date, or refinance it at a later date if interest rates are lower.
Is it fixed?
It's fixed.
It's fixed. Okay.
Everything that we're looking at is fixed.
Okay.
We prefer fixed rate loans because it provides cost certainty over a long period of time.
Right.
If you go with variable rate loans, if you could predict, or if anybody could predict what's going to happen in 10 or 20 years, then, well, I wouldn't be here if I could predict that.
Right.
But cost certainty is very important to us and for ratepayers because we know what we're going to have to bill for
Right.
a long period of time to cover this cost,
Right.
as opposed to some uncertainty.
Yeah. Especially with the rest of the uncertainty with the economy.
Yes.
We just had our JPA board meeting where you guys presented on this update last night. And as I'm watching it, you had a team give the presentation. It was a team of like 3 or 4 people that went up total, including our project manager, Oliver. Can you talk about how important it was to embark upon this process through this joint finance authority? Is that what it is?
Well, there's a joint finance authority.
That's the official name, right?
Well, that's the entity that enters into the debt,
Okay.
but it's a joint powers authority project.
Project through the JPA,
yeah.
right? So basically the combination of Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and Triunfo,
Correct.
our finance teams.
Correct.
You guys went to work on this. Can you talk about how important that partnership was?
Well, I think, and actually, I was thinking about this. So I think the phrase that best exemplifies this is that we're stronger together.
Yeah.
Because when you apply as a partnership, you're more competitive
Mm-hmm.
because you're providing regional benefits
Mm-hmm.
to a larger area. You're able to spread the cost amongst more customers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just our Las Virgenes customers paying for this. It's Las Virgenes and Triunfo Water Sanitation District customers that are going to have to pay for this.
Mm-hmm.
And we just are able to better compete for loans, grants, everything when you
Right.
have a larger regional project like this.
Exactly.
And then another thing that we're doing for the first time now, actually, is we both have need to do a rate study. So a rate study looks at and projects what rates need to be for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So we're doing a rate study together with the same consultant, which is really going to make it more efficient for customers of both districts because the rate study consultant is going to be intimately familiar with the JPA, its projects, the Pure Water Project, and be able to develop a rate plan for both agencies that accomplishes our goal of minimizing the impact to efficient customers and spreading the cost fairly amongst all customer classes.
Oh, that's a great segue. So the rate study is kind of next steps, right? What can our customers do in the now, right, to kind of help either individually or collectively to help kind of keep these cost impacts on their bills as low as possible?
The way that Las Virgenes has structured our rates, like I just said, is to really try to minimize the impacts to efficient customers.
Right.
So the best way to minimize the impacts of this project or any of our projects onto your bill is to be an efficient customer.
There you go.
Now, I'm not saying that your bill won't go up,
Right.
but our strategy is to have inefficient and wasteful customers pay a higher percentage of the project cost than our efficient customers.
Right. So saving your water goes a lot further than just having a lower bill in the present.
Exactly.
It affects the way that you'll be paying your bill in the future, especially as we increase reliability.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. So next steps,
So next steps.
the rate study.
Well, we have the rate study, and then we also have a group of internal staff and also consultants and lobbyists and others who are trying to secure more funding that doesn't have to be paid back,
Right.
either through grants or other appropriations. And the more successful we are with those, then that will reduce the amount of loans or bonds that we have to issue, which will reduce the long-term cost to customers.
So there's a chance this 466 number can come down.
There's always a chance.
There's always a chance. There's always hope.
Well, and I think our focus is not necessarily to bring that number down, but bring down the percentage of that number that has to be repaid directly from ratepayers.
There you go. Because we have the funding sources, but we want to make sure our customers aren't footing too much of the bill.
Exactly.
That's the priority.
It's like I think you started this by saying, one of our goals is to spend other people's money.
As much as possible. That's also one of my personal goals, just overall in my life. Just got to put that out there. But that's a shared value with my workplace as well. And that benefits all of us. Yeah. Well done. This was an illuminating episode, as are most of my conversations with you. I think that this is really valuable information. The science is really interesting. Obviously, the need is there. But oftentimes with capital improvement projects like these, you have the ability, but the limit is where that funding stops. And I think that we at the JPA and ultimately our customers are very lucky to have people like you, professionals like you on the team and your team that know what they're doing and know how to make sure we can carry out projects like these to ensure water in the future and thus living in our lives in this beautiful space. So I'm grateful to you, Don, and thank you again for joining us. Again, I'm sure this will probably once again be one of the most popular episodes. And it was really great having you on.
Well, thanks. I enjoyed being on. And, I just want to give a shout out to the entire team. I mean, it's really a team effort. And like you saw last night, we have consultants and in-house staff in both agencies that have been working diligently on this for years now.
Yes. Yeah, and I love it. You can see the enthusiasm just in the board presentations. I think one of our board directors asked a question that kind of veered into tax law territory. And the gentleman that was up presenting at the time, you can kind of hear his whole voice light up. And I didn't see his face, but I'm sure his eyes were lighting up. And he wanted to go into it really bad, but it was going to be too off topic. And I really do share that kind of enthusiasm for what I do in water. But I absolutely hate numbers and money and percentages and all of that. So the fact that you guys have that enthusiasm and it shows in the work and your coworkers and ultimately JPA customers get to benefit from it, I think is incredible. And we're all very lucky.
Well, thank you. And we're lucky to have you because we're not always the ones out there.
We're not always the ones getting people excited about indirect potable
Exactly.
reuse and advanced purification.
It takes a team. It takes a village.
I'll happily fill that role. All right, so there you have it. We just put the fun in funding, and we will see you all next time. Thank you again, Don.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, guys. See you next time.